Well, I think this is quite possibly one of the busiest I've seen the space in a long while. Welcome, everybody. Sorry, just let me know if you can't hear any of us and we'll shout or eat the mic. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is quite a bit of a crowd. I'm Selim Aykut. I'm the director for ATÖLYE Middle East, and I'll let everybody introduce themselves, but thanks for joining the Fluid series with us this afternoon. The topic is in a very high level, Web3, and no, we're not going to be talking about the tech aspect of it. What is blockchain, how it works? There's a fair bit of conversation going on around that. The guests that we have here, along with my co-moderator, Melissa, we're basically going to be focusing more on the user and the human side of things and what it takes to get into this space, why it matters, why people may or may not feel intimidated by being part of this new paradigm. I don't want to use big words because all of this is very experiential still, right? It's experimental. It may work, it may not work, but there's definitely something going on and there's definitely words to be said about it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic on to the rest of the panelists, and please introduce yourselves and we will get started. Sorry, Adi, go ahead. Oh, the check-in question. Do you have one for me?
Yeah.
All right, let's do the check-in. So over to the screen. Please. I will hand it over to Adil. She does this better than I do.
Hi, everyone. So just to get things going, we just like to kind of gauge and see what you think about it. So for the people here, we'll be passing out sticky notes. But for the people online, we've created a mural board where you can also take part and answer the questions that you see in front of you. I'll be sharing the mural link shortly, and I'll pass by the sticky notes.
All right. Yeah, we're back on. So basically we have 4 questions and on your sticky notes, but I need to see the questions. Okay, the link has been pasted on Zoom. By the way, we're also live and we have, I think, roughly 40 or so participants online as well. So it's a hybrid event. So episode 3, the future of creative industries and Web3. And we have 4 questions. So on your phones or on your Post-its, just answer these as you see fit. And then once we have the answers, we'll actually kick the event off. So question 1, what would you like to learn more about when it comes to Web3 and blockchain? And try to be concise, try to be like, don't write a paragraph. So that's question 1. The second one would be, what key players or companies are you following in the Web3 space, if any? Third bit, what role do you see yourself playing, if any, in the future of Web3? And that's actually one of the core pieces of what we want to focus on today in the panel. And then leave a thumbs up below if you own an NFT or for the physical space, where we can turn it into a check-in question. How many of you here have either dabbled in the space, bought cryptocurrencies, or bought or are holding NFTs? That's a 50-50-ish setup. It's not bad. Not bad. Perfect. So we'll give you guys about a minute. And if anybody wants to sort of share a particular answer among any one of these questions, please raise a hand, say your piece, then we will get started. So what do you want to learn? Who do you follow? What role do you see yourself playing, if any? Then we already did the ownership of NFTs and cryptos. It's actually fun watching murals when people log on, do their thing. right. Anybody want to specifically say a piece about an NFT that they own, that they really love, and why? I'll just also do this and then get started. Anyone? NFT shy, I see. Okay. Maybe that'll change by the end of the panel, huh? Hopefully. All right, then. Should we get started? Yeah. Over to you.
Hello. Hello. Yeah. All right. Yes. Yeah, perfect. My name is Danosch. Thank you, Selim, for the introduction. I'm the co-founder of ArtStyle together with Danosch. I'm also the co-founder of the Sheikhs podcast, also together with Danosch. So a brief intro about me. I'm the guy with the long hair that had to saw a invite, but we realized that I can't be in the NFT space and also have long hair. That would be too much of a degenerate. So I cut it off. What we are doing, or what I've been doing in the past, is I started my first. Hello. Whoa, that's better. Crisp. Wow, maybe too loud. Yeah. Okay. So I started my first company when I was 17, back in Sweden, where I grew up. As you can see from my parents, originally Persian, lived in Chicago, Brussels, Dubai, London, and worked for Procter & Gamble. I worked for ExxonMobil and started a few companies in various spaces. First one was a marketing company. Second one was a light distribution business. And the last company I started was chemicals and commodities trading business. Completely different businesses, but it gave me a huge insight into different industries and how you can learn something from, because the world is moving so fast. And I really believe that the more things you kind of touched on, the more it will help you in this ever-evolving kind of space. And the art space, or sorry, the NFT space, is a space where you can really draw upon different kind of experiences, whether you're an artist, whether you're an investor, whether you are an entrepreneur, and bring all those things together into one. I've been into crypto since 2016. I started to read about Bitcoin back in 2013 because I believe that the way big banks were trying to solve the financial crisis in 2009 was insane. And I thought that that would eventually result in hyperinflation. It didn't happen the way I expected it to. I was buying up a lot of gold, which didn't pay off. Instead, the stock markets were kind of rushing. But we are seeing now kind of a tilt. About 13 years later, we are seeing that change. We're seeing the inflation coming, and I believe that crypto and blockchain technologies are going to play a huge role in this renaissance. And it is a renaissance across industries, across finance, art, across the board, music. So I'm very excited to be here today and talk more about this and how we're building communities in the space.
Hi guys. I'll be shorter. Anas Bhurtun. I used to be a lawyer. I mean, I'm not practicing anymore. I still have my certificate, but previously I did M&A in London and Dubai, over $5 billion worth of deals. After that, I worked with Checkout.com, which is a $40 billion company. I led crypto payments with them, working with the likes of Binance, FTX, all the biggest exchanges in the world. So I effectively became a crypto expert across regulation worldwide. After that, Danosch and I, as you mentioned, we co-founded the Crypto Sheikhs podcast because we wanted to simplify crypto for everyday people. And we now run ArtStyle, which is now the largest community of Web3 NFT folks here in the Middle East.
Hey everyone, first off, thanks for having us. Great setup. My name is Reggie. I got into crypto back in 2012 or so, or 2013, when Bitcoin was about 300 pounds or 600 pounds. And being a typical uni kid, I couldn't afford it, didn't know it was fungible, so I bought Litecoin instead. Fast forward a few years, I've been working in corporate, so I worked with Publicis Group previously, and I was working in a family-owned oil and gas business in Iraq, Kurdistan, and based out of here. I was actually there when ISIS invaded evacuating all of them, joined Publicist Group, was in advertising for a while, hopped around different startups, founding different things. And then at one point, I founded Gather Network, which I'm the founder and CEO of. And I'm also a partner, limited partner at Gap Capital Partners based in Dubai.
Hello, everyone. I am co-moderator today with Selim. My name is Melissa Saoudy, and my background is in management consulting. So I've been consulting for a long time, kind of at the nexus of strategy and innovation, doing business design. And I'm a recently newcomer to the Web3 space, working on business models and kind of in a business design capacity, looking to see how Web3 can unlock and solve for real issues that we have here today and exploring kind of the limits of that technology. And what really excites me about working in Web3 is that I'm not a technologist. I dabble in art, but I'm not an artist. I'm a business designer. And this has given me an opportunity to be creative in a new way. And we're really excited to, I think, unpack that a bit more here today. Okay.
Yeah. Simple is better, right? All right, so thanks for the intro, guys. And so basically, I think what you just started saying makes a real good segue into what we want to discuss, because so far the space, what we call Web3, and I think branding it Web3 was genius, whoever did it. Because up until 2-3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, it was the crypto and the blockchain, and it was all about coding and engineers and backend and smart contracts. So it was very sort of limiting to the average person, who doesn't code, right? So branded Web3, and all of a sudden you have the conversation going on about creativity, going on about innovation, NFTs, arts. And all of a sudden it becomes much more accessible, even though not much has changed in terms of the tech. It's just getting better, faster, new stuff is coming out. But the shift in the mindset actually enabled a lot of us to get even more involved. I've been in the space as a sort of geek person, just reading about it and trying to understand it since 2017. Did my same spiel with like, couldn't afford Bitcoin, bought some stuff, lost some stuff, etc. But all throughout, I probably read more than 200 white papers between 2017 and 2019. Then the more I read, the more interesting it became. And all of a sudden, the question became around, okay, so there's the tech, and you can't make the tech solve problems that don't exist. But what does the tech actually help solve in today's world? And the answer, with the understanding of what we call Web3 today, is fundamentally about redistributing power to the people who create the value. That's, to me, the long and short of it. So I think from that onwards, I want to actually open the space up for a discussion about how is it that we can get more people involved so that more power and more value gets created and redistributed. And primarily, what is so far stopping people from getting involved with this space? Because is it still too techie? Is it still too crypto dudes, crypto bros? Is it still too trader focused, toxic? There's many different things. So we want to sort of explore what are the barriers, the current barriers in the space that stop us from getting more actively involved. Of course.
So I think it's very important, firstly, to contextualize what he's just said, right? Web3 represents the third iteration of the internet. That's the idea. But what is Web2, Web1? So Web1, right, was internet. The internet came out and people started producing websites. When you produced a website, though, that website was only read only, right? You interacted with the website, but you could not create content on that website. It was merely one-way traffic, and that's it. Web2 evolved in this through the evolution very much brought upon by Steve Jobs with the iPhone, which enabled apps to be built, which then resulted in people being able to create content on other applications, right? The rise of Instagram, Facebook, the rise of the likes of Airbnb. These all represent Web2 because leveraging, one, the growth of the iPhone, right? And also the growth of the likes of the Apple Store, Google Play, etc. People were able to create apps that allowed other people to also create further value on top of that, right? For example, on Instagram, you post a photo. That's you sharing data, right, for the benefit of other people to consume. Now, the problem with this model, well, not necessarily a problem, but the limitation was that none of us who shared value on these Web2 applications were able to own any part of that. When you share a photo on Instagram, you're merely sharing private information and your data, right? You're also sharing aspects of your personal life, but you have no invested interest in Instagram itself, and Instagram makes money off of you doing that, right? The same thing can be said for the likes of other Web2 applications. Web3 seeks to disrupt this process merely by offering people the ability to own the underlying network. So instead of merely putting content out for the benefit of others to consume with no return on your behalf, you are able to create content that is purchasable, that there's a marketplace for your work, that when you own something that is created, right, you get some value in there. That's a big part of it. But also the fact that it's distributed, the fact that no one party owns and can collapse a given entity. If Instagram collapses, and if Facebook collapses, or if a bank collapses, you collapse along with it because your work and your assets, all of these things are assets, their IP rights, are held on those platforms. So the idea behind Web3 was to redistribute the ownership of assets across a system that cannot be broken down by a centralized authority and allow you to earn and make money on those platforms.
Thank you for that. And that was almost like preach. No, I can sense that he really like lives and breathes this, and I'm actually in the same camp, because just to build off of that, right? You're an artist and you have come up with great art, great music, you put it on Spotify, you get 1 million listens or 2 million, whatever. Spotify makes a good chunk of money. We all get to appreciate your music for a fraction of a cost. You don't get much out of the value you generate. And Web3 seeks to disrupt that, and disintermediation becomes key in getting rid of all these monolithic powers. So that's the general sort of philosophical framework. But now the question is, how do we get more and more people on board the space as creators? And to Melissa's point, you don't have to be an artist, you don't have to be a coder, you can be anybody who is just interested in this new world order, this new vision. So what is at the moment stopping us from doing this at a sort of mass adoption level? That's the key question, because we crack that, you get users on board, and just like in any user-centric design process, then everybody else gets involved. Then the institutions get involved, the governments start paying attention, which they already did. Unlike 2017-18, when it was just a hype that died down, now there's great ecosystems running on blockchain, and the governments can't really like shun from it. In fact, like Dubai just recently announced the laws and regulations around digital assets to regulate them the right way, to protect investors, to help builders, to facilitate the ecosystem growth, which is why I'm actually not only bullish on the entire like narrative, but bullish on Dubai as well for becoming a unique location on the planet to help propel this mass adoption. So having said that, who wants to sort of talk more about like why we can't at the moment?
I think one of the largest problems we have in this space right now is if you want to enter as a regular user, not a trader, not an investor, just a regular user, participate. What do you have? You have Axie, play to earn, right? But that goes on for so long. And then let's talk about, apart from that, the user experience right now. If you want to participate in crypto, what do you got to do? Download a wallet, get your private keys, store them safely, transfer some decentralized exchange, if you even know how to do that. The whole aspect, the whole journey from start to end is so horrible right now for the average Joe who's not a technophile, right? Someone who's 40 years old, 50 years old, it's not for them right now. We are not at that point where, someone can just pick up and get attuned to the basics of crypto really quickly. It's just not going to happen. And the other part, besides things like play to earn, which is, coming out now, you need capital to participate. Small amounts of capital, but you still need some amount of capital to participate. So places like Africa, or where people don't have disposable income, it's a large barrier to entry, which is sad to see right now because the amount of innovation going on in the space is absolutely massive.
Very good.
I could just elaborate on, I think that's a really great point. I think for definitely, I think certainly around the capital and kind of getting into the crypto space, right? But I think kind of in the more broader sense from a Web3 space and becoming a creative or active contributor in the space, I think some of the barriers to entry, at least for me initially, was around kind of my mindset. You know, I'm not a technology person. You know, I didn't study software engineering. What should I be doing in this space? And I think one of the things that really helped me, and I think is really, really critical whenever you're trying to learn something new, is to kind of recognize if you're having a fixed mindset, which is, I don't know, I can't, you know, the kind of negative self-talk, and instead then move to a growth mindset. Because the reality is Web3 is evolving every day. There are new use cases, new applications, people are solving for problems every day. And the amount of knowledge and information that is out there is also quite a bit. And so if you don't adopt kind of a growth mindset, which is that, you know what, I can learn about this. I can find the people that are similar to me. I can find the sources of information that I trust or the ones that speak to me and my set of interests and my values. If you don't kind of take the initiative to do that, then that can be a real barrier, which is just kind of the mindset itself. Because for even someone that is trying to open a crypto wallet, right? If they're like, oh, this is too difficult, I can't do this, right? If you give up right away when you first start, then you won't necessarily be one of those contributors, right? In what is something very exciting, right? That obviously all of us, if you're the Kool-Aid, we're quite excited about. But I think adopting that mindset that yes, I can learn. Yes, I can find out. Yes, I can find what's right for me. And yes, I can contribute is really important.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to add something to that. So in the Web3 space, everything, all the terminology is very complicated. And I think that's a barrier to entry because people get scared away by the terminology. So Web3, you know, what's that? That sounds, you know, super weird. Or like blockchain. How many people in here have actually gone and watched, you know, what a blockchain is on YouTube? And even NFTs. I mean, non-fungible token. What the hell is that? You know, fungible. What the hell is fungible? So in order for people to actually be able to get into the space and enter the space and bring that mass adoption, I mean, part of the reason why we're all here today is because we want to learn and we want to bring more people into the space and bridge that gap. And if we come here today and there's 50 people here and five of you go home and have learned something new, and maybe one of you become an expert, and next time that one person is speaking in front of 50 other people, then we have succeeded. So I think that the key for this space to grow is one, information. And of course, technologies will develop, and you know, the barrier to entry in terms of cost will eventually come down as these new technologies emerge. And I think we're just at the start. It's great that you all have come today and shown interest, because by taking that responsibility for yourself, you are learning about these tools that are going to have a major impact in your lives moving forward. And is going to offer you massive, massive opportunities for work, new skills, and opportunities across different industries.
So to add on to that, by the way, when you talk about the new opportunities, new businesses, new paradigms, the aspect of what was just talked about, I think converges in the aspect of community, right? I mean, most of you are Atölye friends or friends of Atölye friends. So what we do is about community building, like building communities with like-minded people who are driven towards a common purpose. And from what I've seen over the past, especially 2 years, the Web3 space, not the crypto trader space, that the toxicity of that I'll leave aside, because that's an entirely different discussion with its own nomenclature, with its own like weird meme culture, which can be funny. But Web3, when we talk about creators and builders coming together to like promote new projects, come up with new use cases, build like literal communities that transcend the digital realm and actually end up in like physical meetups and everything. I think that's when the real growth, and to your point, sort of people onboarding their friends and their own communities actually will unlock something. And I actually want to talk about trust, because how do you find trust in a space that is right now notorious for what is called rug pulls? You know what rug pulls are? Has anybody been rug pulled before here? Yeah, okay, so some of us have been. So the rug pull is when you invest in a project and the creator of the project takes your money and just disappears. The rug gets pulled under you, and then you're left with nothing. So the question is, and I'm gonna sort of turn it over to the both of you first, because you are building the sort of prominent arts-focused community in the Web3 space here. How do you build trust? And based on that trust, how do you build a community?
Okay, so what we have seen is that there is usually a formula, but just like in any industry, you never know. Like even sometimes brothers and sisters, they scam each other. And at the end of the day, you just need to be really careful. What we have seen in the NFT space is because there's so much money to be made, people get very greedy. And what we try to look for when we either work on a project or invest in a project or decide who to collaborate with is one, who are the people behind it? So many NFT projects right now, there's a term in NFT space called doxed or non-doxed. Someone that's doxed means they are public. You know, they are not using their avatars or anonymous names on the website. Non-doxed people, investing in a project where the team is non-doxed, i.e. anonymous, is risky, because if they take off with your money, you don't really know who took off with the money. And the second thing is, if the team is doxed and you know who it is, what's the track record? What have they actually done in their previous career in the real world, so to say, and been able to achieve? And what credibility do they have? So what we're trying to do here in Dubai, I mean, for the last 1 year, we've been busy, meeting every single person in the NFT space and building up a reputation with them and build a trust by throwing some of the most amazing NFT community meetups and events, and just, building a very, very solid community. I mean, within our community, for example, we had people that were in financial trouble, and we rallied the whole community behind that cause to just help that person out. We had someone looking for a job and then linked him together with someone else within the same community to work for that project. So we have always had, we never started with the idea of, okay, we're going to get into this space and make millions. We just started with the idea, okay, who's out there that is also into NFTs? And we realized that there's 10 other people in the whole of Dubai. This was about a year ago. And we're like, wow, we met the whole NFT space here. And little did we know that there were a lot more people out there also interested in the same thing.
So why is community important in this space? It's very different from traditional building in a company. Web 2 and before this era, right, was very much driven by a product first, and then the distribution, which is the customers, they come sort of afterwards, right? So if you think of the likes of even, the major companies we know, Google, Apple, these guys produced the product and then effectively got the customers that way. Now, it doesn't really work in this industry very well anymore, because the way the world has changed, it's led to a world where people want to be involved as stakeholders in some way, right? And traditional companies are backed, by VCs who effectively give serious capital to the founders to then build the product, and the primary winners end up being those VCs. People in this space who have been activated, so to speak, they don't really buy into that as much anymore. What they want to do is they want to be part of the building of that company. So I'm a big fan of rock and roll. I'm a big fan of Led Zeppelin. And I always use this example. So imagine it's 1965 and you found Led Zeppelin, right? And you don't know that they're going to become one of the best rock bands in history, but you're one of the 5 to 10 people there first supporting them, right? Now, all of a sudden, fast track 1971, right? They're in front of Times Square, they're partying and doing super well. What did you get for being the first supporter of Led Zeppelin when they were nobodies, right? You don't get anything. So that's the primary idea behind Web3 and why community building is so important. You need to reward the community who supported you in the beginning, because they are the ones who then spread the idea about who you are. The second part about community building as well is that in Web3, marketing is actually done by your community. So if you look at the likes of the most famous brands right now in the NFT space, it includes the likes of the Bored Ape Yacht Club, it includes Artifact, which was bought out by Nike, it includes the likes of Doodles. So these projects, right, the primary way in which they become something substantial is by their own community supporting them, wearing their avatars as their sort of their profile pics on Twitter. When this happens, it's effectively free marketing, right? How can you imagine McDonald's or whatever, these Web2 brands, having people wear their brands as their profile pics? We don't really see that, right? People, the reason why is because they're customers, they're not community members. They don't have a financial interest in this, right? But by wearing these and showing support for this project and effectively getting people to also be aware of it, they know that they're supporting a brand in which they have a vested interest in some way. And so the brand grows organically through community building, right? So this is why Danosch and I have focused on building the largest NFT Web3 community here in the Middle East first, and then understanding what that community wants to reverse engineer the products and service they require to make them happy, right?
Thank you. I actually want to throw a curveball your way because we have been talking about the building of the community, the people, but Gather Network, I think, is also trying to solve another problem from a different angle. And what I want to actually tackle is you basically, the aspect of building a community and getting, in quotes, free marketing, where people literally wear your brand on their digital profiles, on their watches everywhere, is you can get rid of advertising. And I think what Gather is trying to do in that regard is try to tackle the same thing, because we all hate advertising, right? Netflix just came out losing 200,000 customers and stock price tanks, and they come out saying, hey, we're going to look for a cheaper option, but you're going to get ads. Dude, the first reason why we signed up for Netflix is because we don't want ads. So distributing the financial incentivization to the users and the builders and getting rid of the intermediaries and the advertising space, I think that's what Gather is trying to do. So I actually want to see how you tackle that from the builder side of things.
From the builder side of things, so it's essentially very simple, right? What we want to do is, like you said, no one really likes ads. YouTube ads, Netflix ads, Spotify. It's a necessary evil right now. Content creators have to make money, but there is a better way. And how we do it for content creators, it's not via NFTs or anything like that. It's very simple. We basically use the spare computing power of end users, of your website visitors or app users, and then that's used to power our blockchain. In return, you as a content creator get paid. And it's more than what you get from ads. You don't have to bombard your users with toothpaste ads or whatever you see going on Google or searching stuff. I mean, I work in Publicis. The kind of data collection they do is so bad. Like what they know about you, it's ridiculous. That's why really privacy centric. We don't collect data. We never will. And that's, I think going in the future, your privacy is really important, and it's only getting devalued as we go further and further. And this is something that's more of a sidetrack. People talk about privacy and blockchain. It's actually very easy for things to be tracked on the blockchain with Bitcoin. While you have privacy coins such as Monero where things can't be tracked, it's easier for things to be tracked on chain right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's also one of the other barriers as we were talking, because people are scared of their privacy being violated, etc. But the brilliance of the tech, at the end of the day, blockchain is a public ledger. It records transactions, and you can view the transactions from where to whom or to where, for how much, at what time, and then you can track it. So the entire conversation about like sort of the money or the cryptocurrencies being used for illegal means, etc. The most untrackable thing on the planet today is hard cold cash. It's paper. You can do many things with it and nobody knows what you're doing with it. So that aside though, I actually want to have an observation and segue into something that we discussed in the morning. At the moment, you see there's like 4 dudes and only 1 lady or 1 woman who is actually in this space with us. But when I look at the audience, and I don't know about the online, but I see a lot of more like women representation, female representation in the audience. So the question is, why isn't this set up here more of a 50-50? And why do we have a lot of more women sitting with us? And I'm actually very glad. And yeah, of course, please. Sorry, I sort of like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, but not really. Sorry, not sorry.
So there's a very interesting thing within crypto, something called crypto Twitter. It's where you have most of your prolific traders, investors, all there. And I think you mentioned toxic pro culture, right? Which is huge. I mean, it's a boys club. I'll give you an example. There was about 3 weeks ago, I think we were on the panel call, and there's this known personality called Crypto Finale. And she was honestly abused by at the crypto conference in BTC Miami. She went and raised the flag to the official freaking crypto Twitter handle, the Twitter handle of this conference. And that person came and just, in a lack of better word, shat on her straight up. In what world does that happen, where an official handle from an official representative can come and do that? That's one example of stuff like this that happens. And I don't want to go into too many details because I don't think it's appropriate, but it's one example. And then you have these walled gardens. We're talking about trying to remove middlemen. You still have a lot of people who control the gates in crypto because they were so early, be it capital, networks, power, exchanges as well, right? They're all there, and that still exists right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think when we talk about this, and thank you for raising that example, obviously that's alarming and terrifying. I think when it comes to this, we need to think about why, right? Because if the promise of Web3 is so great and everyone can be a creator and it is truly decentralized and it is for the people by the people, and then you have the exact same representation of the people that are calling the shots and are empowered as, you know, the Web 2 and Web 1 before it, then we're just going to end up in a similar situation with Web3. And I am the only woman sitting up here, and I'm also maybe the newest to the space as well, which I fully acknowledge. I never say that I'm an expert, but I am a creator, I am a contributor, I am an enthusiast, and I'm an explorer. And it took a lot of courage actually to be up here today, considering the fact that it was quite difficult to find women that do have relevant experience with this space that were willing to sit in this chair. Now, I have a theory on why I think this is, besides the historical reasons for the fact that, a lot of Web3 has been built on the actual infrastructure of technology. There tend to be more men that are developers than women. But beyond that, why aren't there more women now in Web3, right? If you don't need to be a technologist, then that shouldn't be an issue. Yeah, then there should be a plethora more. And I am also very excited to see so many women sitting here as well. One of the things that as a woman, and I'll speak to the women in the crowd, you've probably seen the studies, women tend to be worse at self-promotion. It's just kind of a thing, right? So one thing that is, I think, so important is that we need to kind of not only just be curious and kind of look into the space, but also stand up and say, yes, I'm doing something in this space, right? Or just be proud to showcase your achievements or even your curiosity and your interest. I found that doing that within this space has been really helpful for me. Like, a lot of people have opened their arms and been generous with their knowledge and their support. But I would encourage any woman, man, doesn't really matter. But if you are interested in this space and this is something that you would like to continue to explore, and you do happen to be a woman, I would suggest that if you, as you do so, let people know that you're doing it. It doesn't have to be something that's kind of hidden away or secret or something of the sort. Rather, let people know, because it's so important, because ultimately we all need role models, right? So,
yeah, okay.
I have a lot to say on this topic.
I just want to comment on that too. So I think one of the reasons why we see so many women here today is probably because they saw 4 handsome men on the invite.
Boo!
Jokes aside. Jokes aside. But we're seeing, even in our community, we see a massive misrepresentation or lack of representation of women. There's about 10 to 20% women in our community as well versus men. And it is a shame to see that. And I don't know what the real reason behind that is. I'm really happy that there are so many women here today that are interested in this space, because we are super passionate about bringing more women into the space. And I don't, like, with the risk of being generalizing too much, but perhaps women are more rational than men and take more time to and actually take more time
Okay, we'll
to
take that.
not take too much risk into going into this space. I have no idea.
Okay, I disagree with everyone. Firstly, there are plenty of women in the space. They're just not actively being represented. Some of the earliest people that I interacted in the crypto space were women. One of the initial reasons why I believe initially there might not have been the right representation of women is perhaps because the number of people who were initially in crypto largely came from backgrounds from STEM, right? Science backgrounds and technology. Now, traditionally, the representation of women across STEM professions has been low, not because of ability, but because of social issues, right? Social issues have pushed women away from STEM degrees. We're starting to see that change big time. Now, one great thing that I think I've observed is that the NFT space has brought a lot of, it has changed the industry completely by bringing a lot of women into the space from the creative industries, women who are artists, women who are designers. And for me, look, on our team, the ArtStyle team, we're actually 50% women, right? One of our co-founders, Christelle Bashara, she's one of the leading artists here in the Middle East. She's a woman. Some of the leading artists in the NFT space that I know and which the work that I own are mostly women. The first NFT that I bought was from a woman. So I don't think this is correct in any way. I would say that we just haven't had the right ability to select. Perhaps if you'd let me select this panel, we would have had a lot of women on this panel.
I think that that's really helpful. I mean, in terms of the fact that that's actually, you raise an interesting issue. So if what you're saying is that there are very many women in the Web3 space, however, they are not being heralded as such. However, they are not being promoted in that being way. They're not being heard, right? And so then that question, then if we can all acknowledge that, then, and even actually my whole team is women, actually. But then the question then is back to you guys, right? With your community where you have 10 to 20% women.
Ouch. Okay, I'm gonna reel back the discussion to a place that I think this actually segues into, because as you can see, everybody's really passionate about building or helping build the Web3 space as an active contributor. Like Melissa's doing her own thing, I'm doing my own bits, ArtStyle is doing its own thing, Gather Network, and there's a ton of different projects. But at the end of the day, there is an interesting sort of unified sense of belonging to this space. Even the most competing projects out there, like you go on crypto Twitter and you got Bitcoin maximalists, you got Ethereum maximalists, you got Avalanche Bros, like even competing projects, when it comes to defending the space of Web3 and growing crypto, there is actually a rallying cry. So I think fundamentally it is up to all of us, and including you, because you're here and you're technically still early to this whole thing. I think it is up to us to help define and help build this space the way we think is the right way. And there may be more than one right way, but the key beauty of what we're doing here is in Web 1 and in Web 2 and in the traditional real world, as you call it, or as we also refer to it. Rules have been preset, right? There's laws and there's regulations and there's thousands of years of social norms that have been accepted for whatever real reason. But today, what we're trying to do with what we call Web3 is actually we're literally writing the playbook from scratch. There is minimal laws and regulations in the space, which is why what makes it semi-dangerous from time to time. But the flip side of that is we have a blank slate that we collectively can define, write the rules around, change them as we see fit and as the need evolves and emerges. And we do this collectively, right? The whole, and we haven't said maybe decentralization maybe once or twice so far, but the whole idea of decentralization, apart from that being a buzzword, is you literally gather a group of people like this, put something to a vote, get them to discuss it, come to a conclusion, and that basically becomes written into the code, and code becomes law. Yeah.
Decentralization. You know, I think we mentioned Beanstalk, very popular protocol. Yep. Decentralization isn't the Hail Mary. It isn't, you know, the end all. right? As a very citing an example, Beanstalk, what they did with their decentralization or governance model, right? You can vote for things to happen. They tied their governance model to their capital. A hacker basically, because exploiting this governance model drained about 78 million of users' funds. So there is danger, and extreme decentralization is not the answer as of yet, because things like this do happen right now, but it does have its perks. Cross borders, anyone can participate, minimal gatekeepers, because they still do exist in some form. We can't pretend like they don't, right? Yeah.
No, I do completely agree. And decentralization in that regard isn't the be all and all, but it is to this day, compared to any other model out there, still allows a lot more voices to be heard, to participate, and to actually come to a conclusion. That's what I'm saying.
100%.
So in that regard, the previous conversation that was getting heated up, and it is a heated conversation, and we can keep having another like 2 fluid episodes just on that, which would be perfect. But the idea is, it is up to us to define this new space as we want to define it. There's literally nobody dictating us what to do except us. And to that extent, I think that's what excites me the most, above and beyond everything else that's going on in this space. It is up to us to like write the rules and then go back and tell the boomers, apologies to any boomers watching, but that this is the new way things work, and just either come on board and just stand aside and watch us have fun. On that note, by the way, I'm just going to also check the time, because we have about like 25 minutes or so. We can keep going, but I'm also opening this up to the panel. How about we actually do a bit of a Q&A? Because active discussion, we're talking Web3, let's actually imitate part of that Web3 interaction in a way. Lean is giving me a thumbs up. Okay. Oh, side note, PS, ATÖLYE is 70% female. So 70% female, yeah? So yeah, I mean, we're all preaching, I would say, practicing what we preach. Good. So questions, let's do a bit of questions. Or comments, yeah, I mean, no questions, just you can, yeah.
Is this, oh, it's on. Thank you so much, guys. I came here to learn literally anything. I know nothing. I want to go back to the woman thing, of course. I think, Anas, what you mentioned, saying like there are a lot of people in this space, sometimes it can come across as belittling the problem. Like, yes, they are there, but where? So I guess the question is not, why aren't they there, but what are you guys doing to get them heard? That's my one question. And just a comment, I think also fundamentally a problem is you asked all these men why women aren't in the space. Are we asking women?
All right, the second part of the question, I'll address the audience as we have a lot of women here, and you're in the space, so you don't really qualify for the question, right? But I'm gonna hand it over to you for the first question.
So I'd say that I don't know if it's belittling. My intention was to share that there are significant leaders in the space who are women, and the fact that one of the co-founders of ArtsDAO is a woman, and she's one of the leading NFT artists in the Middle East. It's not a man. In fact, the 2 leading NFT artists in the region are both women, Christelle Bashar and Amrita Sethi. So for me, it was an acknowledgement to that. And, had I had the ability to select this panel, I would have had both of them on this panel, right? The reason perhaps the representation isn't showing perhaps is, I guess it's a question. I mean, I sort of see it differently. Maybe it's this region where it's different. But when I look at the NFT space, when I'm on Twitter, when I'm on Discord, I follow a lot of people who are, I follow a lot of guys, but I also see a lot of female representation. I mean, maybe that's just my curated feed because I follow influencers. I mean, one of the leading fund managers that I follow out of the US, is it the ARK Fund? She's a huge commentator, and so I mean I'm not trying to belittle the situation, but I'm simply acknowledging from my end that I have because of the NFT space, I have began to see a huge influx of women participating, and wanted to acknowledge that.
That's more, okay, if we acknowledge that we can acknowledge the problem, we can acknowledge it, then what are we going to do about it? You know, so for you guys within your DAO, within your community, are there any maybe tangible actions that you're thinking about doing, or maybe you don't have the answer? You don't have to have the answer, right? We can ask everyone here. You know, there's many more voices than just the 5 people sitting on this.
So I think it's very fair to say crypto Twitter and NFT Twitter, or NFT and crypto as a general, you will see a lot higher percent of women participating within NFTs. For whatever reasons it may be, because it's art, it's culture, you're seeing it's easier entry, there's less stereotypes that go on. But in crypto Twitter or the other side, DeFi, etc., it's a lot less. I mean, within Gather, we're about 30%, 40% women. We have a lot of initiatives we do as we go forward, but it's because we don't focus specifically on NFTs. It's just it's not just us, our company, it's most non-NFT companies have this problem within the space right now. And everyone's sort of basically doing the same thing, which is women empowerment, you know, equal access, things like that, but that still doesn't move the needle where you would like to see it.
So one way in which we have solved or addressed this problem very well is, so ArtsDAO hosts Twitter Spaces every evening, 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. So you can find that on, if you follow ArtsDAO on Twitter. My co-host, who's also part of the ArtsDAO team, is Michaela, who is a leading Web3 strategist worldwide, and she's part of the ArtsDAO team. We frequently bring people from, you know, women and men who are leaders in the space. And I mean, she's very good at this, at getting their voices heard. Us with ArtsDAO, you know, we are always putting Christelle and Amrita at the forefront of various events, having discussions with them, having panels. So I think we've done a very good job in ensuring these voices are heard.
Can I say something? Just to add to the conversation. So I think adding to, you know, not stressing too much about who's sitting on the couch, because there's also availability things and a lot of other stuff. But for me personally, being someone who's just starting to get into the space, and by get in, I just mean understand what is going on. There is something very daunting and something that is a big turnoff of the space for me. That's how I felt for a long time, because I was kind of watching it. I was looking at who was involved in it, and there was something in me that didn't feel like I belonged there. And this is, you know, the crypto bro thing that's going on. It's changing. I do feel that. The thing that made me kind of get past that was a community called BFF, which was started in the US. And their whole thing was, we need to bring more women, not just in the NFT space, because I agree that art and NFT space is one tiny piece of this bigger, to me, more exciting puzzle. And their whole mission is educating women in a different way than the way that everyone else has been talking about crypto and Web3 and all of that stuff. And that really became an entry point for me, where I realized it's not that complicated. It's not that hard to learn. There's no one putting up gates that's saying, no, you can't be in here. But that illusion had to be broken somehow. And it had to do with hearing from people who I felt I could feel a sense of belonging to, going back to community. So I do think it's changing, and there's a lot of initiatives, amazing initiatives doing this. And it's becoming more accessible in that way. But this is new. To me, this is how I've seen it.
Well, to add on this about man or woman or something, I don't see it's very a weightage on this. The market is going to grow, whether any gender is there or not. If you see the total capital involved in blockchain, it is going up and up. And more of people, it's about the talent and the interest. So if you see an example on Instagram, you find it's reverse way, what you're talking now. More of women than less men, if you see example. So it's the idea, how they're going to learn it and the interest, So the market is not going to change whether there is a ratio of more women or men. No, it's about the considering this ecosystem. People are trying to believe on it and they get involved. So you get something, see in the future that you are going to gain it and it's helping your life. So everyone will go for it. Sorry? No, I'm not talking about financial aspect. I'm talking in general.
General market growth,
Like,
right?
for example, you see the
People believing in it.
Sorry?
People believing in it and market growth is what I understood you said, correct? What I think is being mentioned is more about equal opportunity and equal access and bringing that representation in of the other gender. Whereas especially when you have large opportunities, if you once have seen crypto Twitter, Instagram, you have all these new crypto millionaires, right? It's about having this for everyone, not just if the market grows or etc. It's more about being fair and equal, and that goes down to
that will eventually take place.
I hope.
Yeah.
It comes back to the very essence of how crypto actually started back 12, 13 years ago. It's about being fair, equality, transparency.
Okay, yeah, sorry, because otherwise it will only be a gender conversation, right? But equally, I do want to add just 3 points to this topic, hopefully, which is more the good news, because I think it feels like it's all negative. And I think a few of you guys have mentioned it isn't actually all negative. One thing is that in the last year, and there's a number of reports on this, I won't bother quoting them, have a look. In the last year and a half in particular, globally, more women are buying crypto than men, probably by about a ratio of 155%. So it's a big difference. So that's the first thing. So more women are buying crypto than men as of right now. So the growth rate is higher. The second, which is a piece of research that I've uncovered in a project recently, which is about, which may be part of the first one, which is women, albeit stereotypically, are often more in the parental context in terms of what they do with children. So with the growth of Gen Z going into gaming and crypto-based gaming and asset building, a large part of mothers are the gatekeeper. So it actually puts them front and center for that entire generation to be enabled and empowered with their first crypto assets, their wallets, their NFTs, etc. And the third piece is that the growth, again, in the emerging markets, I think someone mentioned that earlier as well about equality, is that in countries where currency is being devalued, there's a much higher proportion and uptake again of crypto and digital assets, as we know, because it's a potential safeguarding against the existing economic rule set, again, being driven by women. So I think it's actually something Mel said is probably really the heart of the issue, which is about visible representation and about role models and about that, rather than actually the uptake, because the uptake is actually all heading the right direction. So maybe we end that topic on a good point, because there are some very, very good things.
Thank you. We're going to take a question from the audience and we're going to switch gears. Obviously, this is a very hot topic. We know what the next one's going to be about. And there's going to be no men in the room, maybe. Let's see. Okay, I'm just kidding. So Carla is asking, could we talk a little bit about how the future of products and services could change with Web3? In terms of the experience of users, what could be some tangible examples of use cases and business models?
So, as I've discussed before earlier about how Web3 revolutionizes ownership, products and services are also equally being revolutionized in the same way. So, for example, one interesting project that I came across the other day was identification, right? The world that we're moving into, the most valuable assets that we have are no longer physical assets. They're increasingly becoming digital assets. Some assets like real estate, like art, things in the real world are still important. Food is also a type of asset, but there are new types of assets that are actually, if compromised, hurt us more. Assets like your identification. assets like your numbers, your personal data, things like that. So these assets, which are personal IP rights, right? They need to become decentralized in a way. So imagine all of us have our assets right now held with Etisalat for our phone numbers. We have our assets, personal assets held with the government. There are companies now looking to change that, whereby if Etisalat were to collapse or get compromised, all of us would face a real issue with our information, right? The same thing can be said for banking. There are companies changing this, where your assets are no longer held by one entity, that in order to compromise those assets, you'd have to compromise the entire network. That's the whole bedrock on which blockchain has been built, right? So if you think in this way, you can very quickly identify the various types of services and products in the world today that could possibly become disrupted. Any place where you have the possibility of having your personal assets concentrated and where there is a risk in that institution potentially being compromised or using its power in an unjustifiable way is ripe for disruption. Social media is ripe for disruption because we have a lot of assets and personal data on there. I just talked about sort of your identification. You have governments. Governments are ripe for disruption. I know that's a very big statement, but I've seen a couple initiatives going into city and local government and how that can be disrupted through NFTs. You have the likes of, yeah, go ahead.
Sound-based NFTs is an example. Instead of Spotify, you have an NFT and the royalties go back to the creator. As Anna said, there are a lot of different ways where you can disrupt traditional business models, but the only caveat I would state is there should be a need, because between 2017 and now, people were just creating products and services that didn't actually have a use case just to raise money, etc. And part of the issue with crypto, if you will.
One of the really interesting projects that I've come across, thank you for that, about the need, is maybe you've all heard of kind of like a carbon credit marketplace. So there's a company that I've been speaking to. They're trying to create something like a plastic credit marketplace. They want the world to be plastic neutral. And so what they're incentivizing waste management companies to do is when they recover and sustainably actually recover plastic, and it's actually recycled in the right way, then they basically take the receipt, the invoice for that, and they turn it into an NFT. And so they attach actually a piece of art to it. And so they've wrapped it in this Web3 wrapper. Now it's all in the blockchain. It's all kosher. They audit that the plastic has actually been recycled appropriately. And their intent is to make the world plastic neutral by making waste management companies, getting more and more a critical mass of waste management companies onto the platform, minting their invoices. And then on the other hand, then having, big corporations come in and buy those NFTs. Another use case is a friend of mine who's working on a piece of work in India with a co-op of farmers. So they've kind of pulled them together. They're able to now go to market now as a co-op. They've streamlined their whole supply chain through blockchain. When there's intermittent weather conditions or there's an issue with the crops, they now have access to microfinance solutions. And like even when you go into the supermarket now, you can scan your cucumbers and you can see the farmer that actually, grew those cucumbers, the amount of money that he's made, the delta between what he would have made if he wasn't in the co-op and now that he is.
So there's two things, there's two aspects to this. There's one, why hasn't more industries been disrupted? And what's the reason for only a few industries so far being disrupted by this technology? And what is the actual benefit? So the benefit is that a decentralized blockchain technology helps to eradicate that middleman, that trust that is in between by being completely decentralized. So for example, in the art space, you usually have Sotheby's or Christie's. They act as an intermediary. They charge insane commissions from the artists and are basically the ones who decide what art is good or not. But in the NFT space, it kind of revolutionized that because now the wider audience can decide what is in demand or not. And the artists can get to keep all of the commissions. and also get royalties in eternity. And that's just one example, but we're seeing other examples being, coming up very soon. Gaming is one of them, where we see a lot of disruption happening right now, where in-game assets are being traded as NFTs. And that's why you have these modders buying all these NFTs for games and skins that can be traded in the game and in-game currencies. But what we're also seeing is, soon I believe companies like Netflix, companies like YouTube, Facebook, etc., will be disrupted potentially. Now, the reason why they haven't yet is because in order to disrupt these guys, you need to offer better product. If you can come up with a better product in terms of UI and UX, which is super important, you can disrupt these technologies in a massive way, because what you're doing is you're giving what you said, and it's exactly the words I used a week back when we did the event with Mercedes. We give power back to the people. So there's a company, for example, here in the UAE called M Content. What they're trying to do is essentially become a decentralized Netflix, where the content creators and the people that are consuming the content are actually making money. So if you're watching the content that is made on this platform, you earn tokens. So this is a new way of disrupting a very traditional industry, but as we have discussed, it comes back to a product and the product being superior.
Just to add on that, and I think there is one more question. At the end of the day, the next leg of growth, or the market expansion, or more adoption, whatever you want to call it, it is going to come in the same way Steve Jobs and iPhone sort of broke everything we knew about interacting on the web, made it mobile, then made it application-based instead of web-based, then enabled a crap ton of creators to come up with all kinds of products. So what we need is the next leg of growth for any industry to be disrupted, is to make it as smooth and as easy and as seamless and as safe to the end user, which is us, who doesn't need to know about anything about tech. Like, you know nothing about how Web 2 works. Have you ever read about TCP/IP protocol? No, you don't need to. You don't need to know any of that. What you need to know is that your data is secure, that you can log on to stuff with one click, that it's safe and it works. So as builders, as creators, and as mostly designers, it is actually up to us to figure out how to get rid of that friction. Because once we do, then there's an entire world that opens for developers and builders to come in and start offering all of these transformational things to the average user with minimal friction at no cost.
Yeah.
So I want to provide you guys with a vision of 2030 based on several things that I've read from VCs, governments. As you know, I used to be a lawyer, so I've been very much in depth on regulation across the world. So 2030 might likely look like this. So we will all be operating our currencies, our financial sort of movements on a blockchain. Cash will be effectively eliminated from everyday transactions. The reason why is cash, the risk of cash is obviously money laundering. The risks of blockchains is that everything can be tracked. There are dystopian aspects around this as well, because governments are able to look at this, but everyday transactions will occur on blockchains every day. The transaction speeds will increase. The costs of doing transactions will go down. So we will be full blockchain enabled. People will largely be, the concept of employees, managers, and businesses will completely change. A lot of people will have multiple streams of income coming from ownership in the companies that they work through tokens. And also they will no longer, they won't necessarily work trading time for money. One of the reasons this is going to happen is because the rise of AI, the rise of robotics is replacing the need for manufacturing and everyday sort of laboring power. So governments are going to have to spend significant sums of money in retraining a population to increase their human capital. What's going to have to happen is people are going to have to use their brains and creativity to earn money rather than simply muscle power. The third thing, which is also potentially, I don't know, you could say it's dystopian, is perhaps 50% of the world will be earning money through play to earn. Effectively, the gamification of the world is increasing. And so to incentivize people to continue to be involved in their work, there will be a strong element of play to earn involved with how the workplace is reorganized. Furthermore, I think we will also see the emergence of significant decentralized autonomous organizations. These are companies effectively built on the blockchain, which are owned effectively by the community and ran. So we run ArtsDAO, which is effectively the first real DAO coming out here in the Middle East. DAOs will have multi-billion-dollar holdings of assets. DAOs will own real estate, and people will effectively, they may pay rent to these DAOs. DAOs may also be governments or cities, which will organize the payments of various different types of everyday goods and services. Big companies are going to become DAOs as well, because they want to leverage the power of the token economy. So that's the future, I think, that 2030 is likely going to look like, according to a lot of other people.
Can you tell us what DAO stands for?
I just said it, a decentralized autonomous organization. So what it is effectively, in a nutshell, imagine a WhatsApp group with a tied bank account to it. All of you in that WhatsApp group can see everything that that bank account is doing at every single moment. And you have the ability to influence what that bank account does. So these are becoming very important because of the stakeholder economy that is being built right now, where we as people do not want to exchange time for money. We want to use, we want to have our brain make money for us. And that involves decision-making and the tokenized economy. So, yeah.
Thank you. Very helpful. There are two questions in the chat. One of them is going to start a whole new, I think we might be here for
Episode
4
5?
hours,
All right.
but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's about sustainability, which is what everyone, wants to talk about these days. Isn't minting and gas fees environmentally unfriendly?
Can I take this quickly? And then I'll pass it to you.
I knew you'd like this one.
Yes, and it's changing, and proof of work, which is the technology that Bitcoin uses, whereby you spend a lot of energy to try to solve a puzzle, and when you solve the puzzle, you make money, is now.
Selim, wait.
Yeah.
Tell us why it's unsustainable right now, or
At
has
the
been.
moment,
So for anyone who doesn't know how it's actually working.
If you want to simplify it, go ahead. But the short answer is, with new proof of stake technologies, there's going to be much less energy spent with a lot of. Okay, you know what? Take it. So currently, the way operations work with blockchains is, imagine you have a book in front of you, right? And every time you do a transaction, so me and Danosch send money to one another, a thing is written on that page, all right? Eventually the page gets filled up and we have to turn the page to get more transactions on that page, right? Now, to turn this page currently, the way it works is you have to spend computing power. And the way, in very simple terms, this is occurring right now, it's through a number of miners all over the world. These miners solve a super tough mathematical question in order to turn this page and add a new block, right? They do this because they are rewarded in Bitcoin for doing that. By doing this, they ensure the protection of the network. Now, why is this all necessary? This is all done through cryptography. Cryptocurrency stands for cryptography and currency coming together. And the best way to create a decentralized system where no one person has control is to have this system in place through miners all over the world who are able to solve these mathematical problems and ensure that when the page is turned, the previous page isn't amended in any way. The whole concept of crypto is immutability. Immutability means the past cannot be changed. If I send 1 Bitcoin to Danosch yesterday, somebody when the page has been turned, can't turn the page back and reverse engineer so that the money actually was never sent, right? So that's where you're almost writing it with permanent marker on that page. So imagine this page as a never-ending book that keeps getting turned, and every time it gets full, that happens. Now, why are gas fees high, especially on Ethereum or these old school networks?
The book is perhaps the size of this phone right now, right? It's so small because it was developed in 2014. And the transactions were not expected to be huge. But what's happened instead now is that there's so many transactions that this page gets full too quickly. And the people who write the words into that page, they effectively can, because of supply and demand, they can charge a higher fee to somebody who's willing to get their transaction prioritized. So let's say me and Danosch are here transacting. I want to send him $300 now. This guy's willing to also send money to Reggie for $300, but he needs to get in line with me to get our transactions on the page. I'm willing to pay $300 plus $100 so that my transaction gets there faster than him. As a result, the transaction fees go up. Now, the solution to this is that Ethereum right now is trying to increase the size of this page, trying to make it even bigger, right? Or they're trying to compartmentalize it so more transactions can come on. And this is the evolution that is currently being pioneered. It's not there yet, right? There are other blockchains that he's talking about, including proof of stake. Proof of stake is a completely different method of doing this, where you basically, instead of having to search for solve a tough mathematical problem, you have instead, you have, a lot of us own coins, right? We let's say each of us own a coin here, and we put it at stake, right? This staking is sort of, we're putting it at risk that if we don't do the transactions correctly, we might lose it effectively. And that's not a very good way of describing it, but effectively it doesn't require the tough mathematical problems, which require huge computing power, which require energy, right? So this is one solution that is being proposed. Ethereum is currently undergoing what's called an upgrade to Ethereum 2.0 to adopt proof of stake and move away from a proof of work blockchain, which is a dinosaur in the industry right now, okay?
I told you, I knew this was gonna
Some
happen.
might disagree with that, but the point I'm trying to make here is the environmental problem has actually already been solved by other blockchains. It's just a question of adoption of those technologies.
One more question from the audience. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
So adding on proof of work, without trying to get too technical, you're describing the size of the page getting bigger. Now I allude to that's being a bigger block size. Right. So there are other every block that you have in a chain, that's why it's called a blockchain, right? One block on a chain over and over. Sure. Right? It has a limited size. So 2 MB, 3 MB, 5 MB, 10 MB, right? Now, there was another blockchain besides Bitcoin that did this to increase their block size, but came across with security concerns, a lower cost of doing each transaction. But yes, coming to proof of stake, and let's say some of the environmental concerns, because I've spoken to like, I don't know how many reporters at this point, everyone asking, oh my God, Bitcoin is ruining the planet. It's going to burn on fire, all these big machines. And I'm like, if you look at right now, how much energy consumption Bitcoin ASIC miners are, which are these machines are big, right? And they mine Bitcoin for you. Also, if anyone wants to mine Bitcoin, go to compassmining.com. It's a really good place. I'm highly vouch for them. I am not involved with them in any way. Basically, people like El Salvador, they're using volcanic energy to mine Bitcoin. The way Gather does it, we use surplus resources. This is proof of work still happening. Proof of work is a system that's being used, has been used for 12, 14 years, and is currently powering Bitcoin, which has had, I think, one major rollback. Rollback means when the chain was changed or there was a fork. Ethereum Classic and Ether are a good example where basically there was a disagreement and the chain split. Right, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
I think we're losing people here.
In Norway, what they're doing is they're putting the Bitcoin or proof of work blockchain miners in Norway using the heat generated to heat certain villages and then use the natural cold air to actually cool off the servers, thereby expending zero energy and actually using the system to heat stuff. So just like El Salvador's mining with volcanic energy, there's also additional things being done for sustainability. You don't even have to go proof of stake for this. So
Nice.
10 years in the works, there's still much more happening. All good.
Awesome. We're gonna take one more because we're running out of time. We'll take
Yeah.
one more from the audience. Jenna? Oh.
Hi, my name's Chad. There are proof of stake chains that are actually carbon neutral. We work with a chain called a layer 1 near that is certified carbon neutral. And I think Avalanche, Algorand, or some other chains that are really focused on that as well. And then just a couple other comments on the whole proof of work, proof of stake debate. Nick Carter on Twitter is a great resource to get information about proof of work, because the way the grid system really works, there's actually a lot of benefits to proof of work. And so I think they've gotten a bad rap unfairly to some degree. And I'm originally from West Texas, which is now doing a whole lot of Bitcoin mining. So anyway, there's a lot happening with sustainability. And I think early on, it got a bad rap in the sustainability community, but crypto and sustainability absolutely go together, because you can get so much better data out of crypto and the technology is there. And so I think we're going to see a lot of projects coming, especially in this region with what's coming with COP28. So super excited about it.
Yep. Thank you.
Does anyone have one last question? Thanks. Just to lead on actually from your point, the United Nations is also using blockchain for environmental impact. So this conversation is growing and growing, especially with the lead towards COP28. Moving on from the sustainability conversation or question, my next question is about what do you think about social impact? And how is blockchain going to be supporting it? At the moment, we are building a DAO specifically around social impact to create traceability, transparency, measurability, so that people have faith again in the donation process. How do you see that growing, and where do you think the potential is for that to become something that's global and create this movement?
Yeah, I think
actually, sorry, I'm just going to add a question to that was related from the chat, which was, what's your take on the promise of anonymity? So it's very similar, like what's the deal with anonymity and transparency?
All right, I'll start, because I'll actually address the social impact aspect, because the good thing about the tech is it makes it irreversibly, immutably transparent, and the way you structure it basically implies that if you're collecting funds for X purpose and you define where that money is going to go by saying X purpose has wallet address this. You collect all the money, you see it in the wallet, then that money gets transferred to the actual wallet of whatever X purpose, that NGO. The process, and I'm oversimplifying it, but it is so blatantly transparent and unquestionable that you are not at the fear of funds being misappropriated unless they actually take the money and then shut down the NGO. That becomes a different ballgame. That's not for blockchain to solve. But in terms of social impact, there is multiple different aspects, right? Transparency is one. For the entire day, we talked about giving power or giving financial freedom back to the people who create the value. So to me, the biggest social impact is if you're creating something, have the ability to cut out the middleman and actually, or middle person, well, man, it still fits, and start making gains on your actual effort, your own IP, your own creation. That is, to me, the biggest social impact of it. But the totality of it is you don't have to go out there and convince big companies or big entities or anything of that nature to be able to do this. You can literally create the DAO, write the code, get your word out there, do your marketing, get your community to actually build this for you and get it done with minimal friction, except to get the money out of the tokens into the real world fiat currency, which is also being worked on. On the topic of anonymity, it is to me, it's a blade that cuts both ways. It allows for great things to be done with minimal risk, because imagine you've built AC, something as sort of valuable. It is one of the most valuable NFT collections out there, where each one of them is worth over $500,000. You've created this and you're holding maybe like 20 in your wallet, right? But nobody knows who you are. So you actually are at a less of a risk to be targeted for multiple things in the real physical world. The flip side is, and we discussed this earlier, somebody comes in, undoxed, you don't know who they are, they raise money, and walk away with $2 million of somebody's funds because they basically came out with a project with no promise of delivering it, took the money and disappeared. So anonymity cuts both ways. It can be used for good, but it also has to be treated carefully because there's a lot of like people out there with bad intent who actually want to make easy money off of something that's so new and so unregulated that they can get away with it.
I would say the more revolutionary part behind how social impact will work is I'm drawing very much from the readings of Vitalik Buterin. I don't know if any of you guys know, he's the founder of Ethereum. You can read his personal blog on his website, but he has significant inputs on this point. So the growth of the tokenized economy means that assets are changing in the sense that everything we live on right now can be tokenized into an asset. Even the air that we breathe can be tokenized as something. So he's had very interesting views on how trees, water, different types of natural resources become tokenized. When you have financial values placed on these different types of assets through tokenization, it can change the incentives around how we consume them, how we protect them, and how we ensure their longevity. So that's one area which I think a lot more research is happening. We're seeing this also not just with that, but also with animals, right? So there's something here now called decentralized science, DeSci. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but some of the leading leaders on DAO, so the likes of Aaron, who's he's with Flamingo DAO. This is one of the biggest DAOs in the US. He has been funding DeSci big time, where you have decentralized autonomous organizations that are behind labs, that are behind experiments. They're using the power of social capital to raise funds through the sale of NFTs. Those NFTs go into a treasury, which then fund research. I've seen some of these guys putting financial tokenized values on animals, on water, all kinds of things. So I think in 2030, that's where we're headed, very much, where the consumption of a resource is reflected publicly. You know, is reflected that this country is consuming billions in dollars of trees every year, which will completely change the social conscience of that nation. That's where I believe huge revolution in social impact will come through.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. So we recently hosted a guest on the Crypto Sheikhs podcast called Verlin. He runs the Ruby Foundation, and they are a foundation that is 100% everything goes to charity. They run a liquidity pool. I'm not going to explain what that is, but 10% or so of the profits are then put into the foundation, which is then completely transparent in how they spend that money on charity. So that, you know, back to your question, how do I see this moving forward? I definitely see a lot more of these projects coming up. We saw when the chaos in Afghanistan happened with the government, there were companies, not companies, there was a project where a guy created an NFT and you could buy a first aid pack. And Anas actually participated in that, and he bought 2 of those packs and contributed to that cause. And, you know, within just a few days, they raised a pretty good amount of funds to help that cause. We saw the same thing happen with Ukraine. And we do see a lot of these things continue to, you know, come up. And I believe the power of the DAOs is that you can pull together resources in terms of people and finances in a very quick and efficient way, and then deploy that for different causes, completely transparent. And, you know, part of that is also the community aspect. So if you can build a strong social impact DAO where people feel part of that community, and you can even create the token, which doesn't have actually physical value, it could be a love token. And you airdrop that love token for everyone that actually contributes in a positive way to that DAO, and can gamify it so that the people that contribute the most, they have the most love tokens, etc. That's a different spin on how you can create these social impact DAOs. And I definitely believe that with blockchain technology, we'll see more of it.
Just to highlight one thing he said, today, if you want to raise in Turkey any amount of funds to help an SMA patient, you need to go through 7 different hoops, go to the municipality or red tape to help. If you want to do this with, like, again, trust becomes an issue, but if you verifiably know that somebody is raising funds for this particular patient, it literally takes maybe an hour in crypto Twitter, if you know the right people and if you get the right traction, to raise the funds, deploy them, and get the solution out of the way. So that to me also is the speed to market. You do this right, and more and more this happens, regulation is going to get restructured to help enable this with the right kind of transparency in place. Okay.
On crypto Twitter specifically, there was a guy, I think his father had been diagnosed with cancer or some life-threatening disease, and he needed $60,000. He tagged, I think it was Kobe, or yeah, you saw it, right? He tagged Kobe a day. Kobe spread it out to the circle. That was it. The funds are raised, deployed, life-saving surgery done. And that's a great example of getting outside this regulation, all of it. And then coming back to a point you said, for example, in the farmers in India, cutting out all that level of corruption, red tape, and you're seeing all this transparency going on. That's going to have a huge impact as we go forward. As long as the people on the other end who are getting cut out from their community,
Yeah, this is actually social impact and the implications to disrupt for social problems using this new kind of world of technology is why I really got into this space in the first place. So I'm a solopreneur. I do consulting under the brand of the Y Impact Consultancy. That's what I do. And what I'm really, really interested in is understanding how we can really leverage, empower people's and really disrupt for social problems the same way that it has disrupted, you know, a series of other industries. So I'd love to hear more about your project.
I'm aware we're running over time, but I'm really glad we landed in a very positive space. That's nice. Maybe just a quick round of one quick piece of advice that you would give everybody here and online if they're just getting in. What should they do?
I would say allocate a tiny amount of money, something you can literally bear to lose. Read up on the basic resources like the BFF DAO that you mentioned. Get in, get your hands dirty, tinker with this to understand how it works, how the space runs, because without literally trying it out, it's really tough today. So allocate that fund as a learning fund for you and invest, because I think it's worth it understanding how this thing works.
Just to add to that, I think, as we say in the NFT space, do your own research. So get on YouTube, check a few clips, understand on a very basic level what NFTs are, what the space is all about, and get your hands dirty. Buy your first NFT if you haven't already, because the best way to understand the space is to get involved. Doesn't have to be an expensive one, just a project that you believe in. It could be any type of project. It could be the art style NFT that we're dropping in 2 weeks as well. Yes, number one, do your research, and two, buy something in the space.
With all due respect, just follow the Crypto Sheikhs podcast. Crypto Sheikhs _ podcast. We produce everyday life bite, sort of easy to consume information on how to get started, how to get your MetaMask going. You know, Danosch and I host a number of people on our podcast, which we take it very simply. You've seen the way that I've explained concepts. I use everyday analogies to keep things simple for everyday folks. So yeah, that's the best resource.
For those who don't have capital to spare, download Telegram, look up the best top 10, top 20 crypto projects, take a week off work or whatever time you can spare, jump in the Telegram and just start from scratch, ask questions. They will have airdrops. They will find you a way to earn some free tokens. That's where you're going to start. In crypto, just as a very quick summary, you have DeFi, you have all these crazy things that are going on. It's going to take you time. Don't get discouraged. If you get rug pulled once, twice, it happens. This is the space. It is honestly life-changing opportunities that happen here. Just take your time, go through it slowly. And the one thing I'll say is leverage on centralized exchanges is something, don't do it unless you are a pro. Like, honestly, you will lose everything and maybe your hair as well.
So it seems like everyone, there's a very common thread to the advice that's coming out here. Instead of taking a week off work, another alternative approach is to today, when you leave, or even while you're still here, go to the Crypto Sheikhs podcast or join the BFF Discord group. Like, just take a small action every day. Yeah. And, just start to look for that information. And I think I'll talk more about mindsets, right? So I come back to this fixed mindset, the growth mindset, right? That even when it may seem difficult and you're like, this is way too confusing, just press on, right? And tell yourself, I'm going to do a little bit of this every day.
Thank you.